Hello, my name is Jesse Lanshe and I'm hosting tonight's show on behalf of Arab American Family Services, or AAFS. You're watching an interactive call-in program brought to you live on cable channel CAN TV 21 and online at cantv.org/hotline. During the next 25 minutes, we're going to discuss domestic violence issues in the city of Chicago and how they impact women and society at large. And I invite you to call in with your questions. You can reach us at 312-738-1060. Our phone lines are open. Joining me tonight is Lillian Cartwright. Hello, Lillian.
Hello.
Can you please tell us a little bit about your background and your relationship with Arab American Family Services and the Chicago Battered Women's Network?
Sure can. Hello, my name is Lillian Cartwright. I've been working with issues of violence that impact women predominantly for the past decade or so. Sexual violence, domestic violence. I've worked with women in the sex trade. So kind of all of the different areas that impact women. Arab American Family Services is actually one of our member organizations. I am here with the Chicago Metropolitan Battered Women's Network today. The Battered Women's Network is the coalition of Chicago area domestic violence service providers here in Cook County region. And Arab American Family Services is one of those member service programs.
You have some other members in that program?
We do. We have about 50 organizational members and several individual members as well.
Oh, that's great. I'm sorry. Well, it looks like we have a caller already. Caller, you're on the air?
Good evening. How you doing?
Hi.
I want to say usually your organization is very fair and not very biased. But tonight it seemed like your announcement you made is a little bit on the biased side. And I know a lot of times the term anger management is very, very vague, because there's situations where men don't want to talk to their wives. They look at them angry. Don't even sleep in the same bedroom with them. Don't have sex with them. Don't eat their food. But yet the court is ordering these men to go into anger management, and it just, I mean, what they classify anger management, it really doesn't make any sense, whatever. And the system is really hitting the men. And it seems like, I want to say, first of all, nobody should be harming anybody directly or indirectly, any type of way at all. But when you look at the way some of these judges are sentencing men in terms of anger management, it is disproportional to women. It's unfair in terms of what they classify anger management. It's really ridiculous.
Well, caller, I appreciate your call. I'm going to have to let you go right now. We will touch on your question. We do have time constraints.
I just make one other quick comment. Even when you look on TV and you look at such shows like maybe Jerry Springer and there's other, I can't think of the name offhand, where you have the women, they could hit the men, slap them, and there's situations where the security hold the men where the women hit them, but if the man made one sort of move towards them, guess what? They have 10 guys jumping down on the guy, whatever. It's like it's okay for a woman to slap, strap, spit, and hit a guy, and there's no type of consequence. We see that on TV as an example, and it's reflecting society as well. Right. I mean, it's like a double standard.
All right, well, thanks for your call, caller. We will address it in turn. Certainly, the caller did make a valid point that domestic violence is a problem for both men and women. Tonight, our guest is from the Chicago Battered Women's Network. I'm unaware if there are any Battered Men's Networks. If there are, certainly reach out to the show and we'll try to get someone on as a guest. Tonight's topics are going to be as they relate to the Battered Women's Network. And if we do get the chance to touch on anger management, I certainly hope we'll have that opportunity. So, Lillian, please go on with... what's your background particularly?
For me, specifically?
Yeah, and how did
Sure.
you get to be associated with the network?
Well, I studied social work in college and came out and I worked in the child welfare system. I worked with a rape crisis center. I developed a program that was a diversion program for women charged with misdemeanor level prostitution in the western suburbs in Cook County. So I've worked with issues that over the years I have found disproportionately seem to impact women. To the caller's point, certainly no one should be harming anyone. That's what we ideally want to see. And men can be and are victims of domestic violence. It's just at a disproportionate, a lesser proportionate rate. So when we look at statistics, say from the Department of Justice, we look at medical statistics from the medical community. We look at social service organizations. We're coming up with the same numbers, and that's between 80 to 95% of those who identify as victims of domestic and sexual violence do identify as female. And so so our resources here certainly are available to both male and female identified folks, but we just tend to see far more women.
And viewers, if you're just joining us, this show is sponsored by the Arab American Family Services. You can see the contact information on your screen. As our guest indicated, the AAFS organization is a member of the Chicago Metropolitan Battered Women's Network, and if you do have a need to contact them, please refer to the contact information on the screen.
And I'd be happy to share a little bit more about what the network does as well.
Yeah, please do.
So the network works to really elevate the concerns of the domestic violence community here in Chicago. So we, serve as a figurative and a physical space for folks to come together and talk about issues that are impacting the victims they're serving. And so we then do policy and advocacy work. We elevate those concerns to the various powers that be. We also provide trainings to folks in the community, as to government institutions, and to our own membership to ensure that they're, equipped with the knowledge that they need to best serve victims. And then we also staff and manage the Illinois Domestic Violence Hotline, and that hotline gets about 30,000 calls a year, 2/3 of which come from the Chicago area. And that hotline, what that hotline does is then connect callers to individual domestic violence programs that could best meet their needs, like Arab American Family Services, for instance.
And just so while we're on the topic, if you want to reach out to the Illinois Domestic Violence Hotline, you can look towards the bottom of your screen. We've got 877-863-6338. So please feel free to reach out to them at your convenience. So Lillian, you are located downtown, is that right?
We are.
And do people have the opportunity to come directly into your office to seek help or counseling?
So not within our office. Again, we do more of the policy and advocacy work, the trainings, and then we offer the hotline for victims. So, or concerned family members or friends, or other organizations. They can reach out to that hotline that will then connect them with the domestic violence service providers that comprise our network.
Okay. And then for the viewers, if anyone would like some further information on how to get in touch with the Battered Women's Network, I'm putting some contact information on the screen for you. Please feel free to reach out to there or the number that was previously up, or also the Arab American Family Services that sponsors this show. Lillian, before we go further, why don't we just back up a bit and tell us what are we talking about when we use the term domestic violence?
Sure. So domestic violence it has a patterned dynamic of physical, not only physical abuse, but psychological abuse, threats, intimidation, coercion, a variety of tactics that are used to exert power and control over another individual. And the relationship between the person abusing and that individual, here in Illinois, we define what that relationship can be pretty broadly. So it can be intimate partners, which would include current or former boyfriends and girlfriends, current or former spouses, but it can also include relationships, sibling relationships, relationships, by blood through a child, and relationships with household members as well.
Oh. Well, it looks like we do have another caller. Caller, you're on the air.
I just want to point some things out, and I hope you have internet access. If you look at the U.S. Department of Justice statistics, women are the number one abusers of children and even senior citizens. And you was talking about a little while ago how women get charged for prostitution. Why it seems to be when women have certain different types of issues, different types of problems, there's always seemed to be an excuse me clause for women. but yet men get the book slammed at them. And when women want to be police officers and lead troops and be jet flying pilots and want to have the women being so weak and they can't do certain things, but I'd like you to be able to address that if you would. I appreciate it, ma'am. Thank you.
Sure, and thanks for your call, caller. We certainly appreciate your zeal, and we do hope that we make clear that certainly domestic violence is not only an issue that is caused by males. Sometimes males are the victims of domestic violence, and we certainly don't want to discount that. But I do believe that Ms. Cartwright has made it clear that disproportionately women are the victims and are affected by men. If she wants to clarify her position.
I can expound on that a little bit too. And so when we're looking at, so yes, women are disproportionately the victims, but we're also looking at the type of violence, right, and the motivations behind the use of that violence. And so when women use violence, it often doesn't look the same as men's violence against women. So men, many times will use kind of those hallmarks of battering, the strangulation, stalking, rape, lethal violence many times against that person who's female identified. When you see a female using violence, oftentimes it's either in self-defense or perhaps with less severity. It's less likely to land you in the morgue, and it's less likely to land you to land the partner in the hospital when it's being perpetrated by a female. Occasionally, there are relationships where there is. Rarely, I will say, there are relationships where there's true mutual abuse. The majority of time where you do see violence occurring at the hands of both partners, typically one person is benefiting more so than the other from the use of that violence. So if one person's world, if you can kind of visualize it this way, one partner's world is getting kind of smaller and more restricted, while the other partner's world, because of using that violence, is becoming more expansive and more empowered. So if that helps to visualize it a bit. But again, anyone can be impacted by this issue.
And thanks for that, Lillian. You mentioned power and victimization. Can you please expound on that a little bit about, what is the genesis of, or the relationship between power and domestic violence?
So when we talk about domestic violence, we're not talking about an anger issue or a substance abuse issue or a mental health issue. We're talking about, a learned behavior that is learned and then reinforced in a variety of ways. Learned and reinforced perhaps within the family, learned and reinforced in the community, and then in broader society and in our institutions. And so it's a learned behavior that really does look at exploiting kind of power differentials in relationships. So it's the use of actual power or assumed power to control another individual. There's a power and control wheel that kind of really is the model we tend to use when we talk about that nexus of power and control as the underlying factor in domestic violence relationships. So if you look at the wheel at the center, at the core, is power and control. The spokes that come out of the center of the wheel represent the different tactics an abuser or a batterer might employ to control his or her partner. Those tactics can include using, economic coercion, using children, emotional abuse, isolation, minimizing, denying, and blaming, and using, someone's privilege in society to control their partner.
So, sorry to interrupt you
Sure.
there. So domestic violence doesn't necessarily have to be all physical.
It doesn't. And in fact, when looking at that power and control wheel, those spokes, they intersect. And then they are reinforced by the use or the threat of physical and sexual violence. So the spokes when the wheel's spinning can almost become indistinguishable, and those are really the tactics that, really kind of serve to ensnare a victim in a situation, and they lay the foundation for that wheel, the outer wheel, which really reinforces the use of those tactics.
Do you think that people, because of the way maybe that it's portrayed on television or in the movies, that people may have a misunderstanding about certain aspects of domestic violence?
Absolutely. I think a big piece is that we often look to what, society will look at what the victim was or wasn't doing to cause the violence, to have prevented the violence. We oftentimes collectively don't look at the person who's using the violence, and hold that individual accountable. There is never a reason to use violence against your partner. There's always another option available.
All right, and in your literature, which are these PowerPoint presentations available through your website?
They're actually not on our website, but if folks are interested in these PowerPoints, I welcome you to get in. You may contact me at 312-527-0730. Again, my name is Lillian Cartwright. These are my PowerPoints with the network, and I'd be happy to schedule a training or to share those.
Well, I think this is going to be a real good resource. Part of the documents that you gave in are common myths about domestic violence. Could you go through these a little bit and explain a little bit further?
Sure. So for, really with the exception of the last, I'd say, 50 years, and particularly the last 30, domestic violence really kind of remained behind closed doors. It wasn't something that was named, was identified. There wasn't language for it, and it wasn't named as wrong. And so we've, now begun increasingly so to acknowledge domestic violence as something that, while very personal, is also something that impacts us on a societal level. There's a cost within our education system, within our labor market, within the medical community. There's a real cost to this issue societally. In terms of some of the other myths, I know, we talk about the violence. Oftentimes you hear that it's not really that serious unless it's, lethal or unless it leaves a mark. But the idea is that, domestic violence happens as a pattern, and that's a pattern that increases in intensity and frequency over time. And so every act of violence, whether it's grabbing someone's arm or punching someone in the face, all of those acts are part of this broader pattern that's going to continue to increase in severity. So they all need to be taken seriously.
If someone is going through some of these instances of domestic violence, what is your advice to them, starting from ground zero, so to speak?
In terms of what the victim?
To seek help. To
seek help?
Yeah.
Sure. When a victim, there are several options. So there are organizations like ours that have, hotlines that, a victim, if she is comfortable doing so, can call. Both to, receive support, but also to hear what her options might be, to discuss how to plan best for her safety, identify the risks that she might be experiencing, and then really to be connected to resources in the community. So I think, taking that first step to reach out is hugely important.
In your experience, do you find that a lot of victims of domestic violence are hesitant at first to reach out to seek assistance?
Many victims are, and unfortunately, that is in large part because of a little of what I've already referenced in terms of the victim blaming. Many times society wants to look and point fingers at the victim and say, hey, what did you do to make him this mad? Or what did you do to make him hit you? Society also sends mixed signals, telling victims not, just try to work your marriage out, stay in it for the kids. And so many times when victims reach out, society, institutions, individuals don't want to listen to what the victim's needs and wants actually are. And everyone wants to, give advice and tell a victim what to do. And so that can really, that can cause a victim to want to just, hold all that to herself. Really what we need to be doing is when victims come forward, listening, supporting, making sure she's aware that the violence is not her fault, and that she's believed, and that there are options available.
It looks like we have another caller. Caller, We are short on time, so if you could please make your question quick.
Say this when men are ordered to go for anger management. Now, how can men go for counseling and whatever they may say in those counseling groups, that stuff could be used against them? Now, how can they get the help if they need any?
Thanks, caller.
Sure. So there are partner abuse intervention programs. Actually, anger management is something we do not recommend for those who are abusing in an intimate partner relationship. So again, spouses, former spouses, boyfriend, girlfriend, former boyfriend, girlfriend. Partner abuse intervention programs are designed to specifically address the use of power and control in the relationship. Anger management is a different thing that works in different situations, but it's not actually something that we advocate for with abusers.
Again, viewers, here's a couple extra myths and facts appearing on screen. Lillian, question: how often do the police or are the police able to offer assistance in this regard? Should they be viewed as a first resort to solve these problems, or an ongoing assistance in matters such as this?
That's a good question. So the police are an option. They're not the option for everyone and for every. I mean, they're available, but they're not always an option that a victim wants to seek out. We are working with the police to ensure that we can provide the most enhanced response possible to victims that seek help. But I would also, encourage victims who don't feel comfortable reaching out to the police for any number of reasons to call our hotline and explore other options that are available. There are a lot of resources that don't necessarily require that individual to engage with law enforcement. And I will just say, in terms of a couple myths, very, very briefly, this is an issue, I want to be very clear, that impacts every community. So it cuts across all demographics. Victims come from every possible walk of life, and I just want to acknowledge that.
Well, thank you. If you're just joining us, previously we showed a number for the Illinois Domestic Violence Hotline. Again, it's 877-863-6338. Additionally, this show is being promoted in association with Arab American Family Services, and I'm flashing that information on the screen as well. Please reach out to them, or the Chicago Battered Women's Network with the information at the contact information previously given. And then finally, this program has been made possible in part by support from Lanshe Law, LLC, family law attorneys. In closing, Lillian, do you have any advice for any viewers who may be going through something and immediate steps that they should take?
There is help, and I know I keep driving home that hotline, but just, that is available, and it's a critical first step. We're here to listen and explore options and support you, and it's not your fault.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Again, Lillian Cartwright with Chicago Battered Women's Network. Thanks, Lillian.
Thank you.